Good afternoon, everyone. This is Enrique Sanchez of Spanish United Radio. I'm the founder and director. This afternoon, we have a very special guest. Would you be kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Judge Arch.
Can you repeat your name again? You kind of cut off.
Yes, good afternoon. This Judge,
Welcome. Thank you for being on the show, Judge.
thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, I attended the LA District Attorney panel on February 8th. I was listening to your comments there in the panel. I didn't get a chance to speak with you in person, but I was interested in a lot of your positions. So the audience would like to know a little bit more about you, what made you get into law, becoming a judge, and what do you have to offer if you were to become elected a district attorney of Los Angeles?
Well, my interest in law began when I was a teenager. In my late teenage years, I was the victim of domestic violence and I suffered a traumatic brain injury. And when I was 21 years old, I had to have brain surgery. I had a blood clot on the brain. And when I recovered from that experience, I made a commitment that I would get to law school. I'd been sort of meandering through that period of my life.
Hmm.
And I started working as a legal secretary immediately within the few months after the brain surgery. And then I worked as a legal secretary. I put myself through Fullerton College, which is a community college,
Hmm.
transferred to UC Irvine. I got a degree and I continued to work as a secretary. And I went to law school at night and on the weekends. I really wanted to be a deputy district attorney because I wanted to advocate for victims of violence and domestic violence, sexual assault, etc.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how my path started. I joined the district attorney's office as a law clerk in 1989, and I spent a total of 28 years there before I was elected to the Superior Court in November of 2016.
Nice, awesome. And if you were to become district attorney, what are the things that you would do to implement reforms in in the district attorney's office right now?
Well, the current district attorney has implemented blanket policies across the board, and I don't believe that that's a one size fits all solution. I think we need to look at justice on an individualized and particularized case basis. One of the last assignments I had as a judge was for the last 3.5 years, I've been over in the Edelman Children's Court, which, in my estimation, is ground zero of everything that's gone wrong in our system, in our society. I was removing 10 to 15 babies from their mothers at birth per week because these babies had methamphetamine and fentanyl in their systems at birth.
Wow.
And we need incredible reform. The position that I have taken is if you are addicted to drugs, if you are a poor pregnant mother addicted to drugs, you must have mandatory drug treatment. If you are selling the poor pregnant woman who's addicted to drugs, including methamphetamine and fentanyl, you are going to jail or potentially state prison, depending on the severity and length of your prior criminal history. I will not
Wow.
tolerate that.
And they also stick up for men's rights as well, because many men are victims of assault by women as well, but it tends to be under the wraps. So do you have you presided over cases like that?
I actually prosecuted a woman out of Glendale for
Oh,
murdering
really?
her friend. Oh, yes. Domestic violence crosses many lines. It's not just male on female, it's female on female, it's male on male, it's female on male. And it crosses ethnic, gender, religious, sexual orientation lines. It's a significant problem. I mean, I'm a survivor of it myself.
Hmm.
And when people look at me, they would have no idea unless I shared my personal story. But absolutely, I prosecuted one woman that comes to mind for murdering her boyfriend. And yes, women do attack and assault men. They also assault their children.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, the reason why I asked, because there was a case a couple of years ago where this young man was assaulted by this woman, but because he was a male and she was female, he didn't get the justice that he wanted to get. And this was back in 2016. So that was a particular case that I handled a while ago with my foundation, Spanish United, because what we do is that we specialize in helping Hispanic people know their rights and at the same time advocate for them because Hispanics are the only minority group within the United States that, because since they don't fall under a racial category, it falls under ethnic or national origin, it's kind of hard to keep up with data and stats. But we do what we can to provide justice for the Hispanic community. Like I started this about 4 years ago, and I've grown from from one chapter of 10 people, to about 6 chapters with over 1,000 people. So we're very much heavily invested in the civil rights and protection of Hispanic people, especially of Hispanic men that have fallen through the cracks in the system.
Well, I couldn't be a stronger ally and advocate for you. No one advocated for me when I was 19, and I kind of had to take matters into my own hands and advocate for myself and for others, particularly in the Latino community. One of the things that I plan to do when I am elected is we need to have more community engagement. So, Mr. Sanchez, your organization would be invited on occasion to monthly community meetings where we're going to have stakeholders in the community, and we're going to sit around at a big table and have Subway sandwiches and Diet Coke and talk about what are the needs of each particular group and individual organization when they come into the district attorney's office, because the solutions need to be with community engagement and not just merely one in the corner office handing out edicts and orders. So I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing in your community and on behalf of both men and women Latinos. The other thing that's very historic, well, there's a couple of historic angles to my candidacy. First of all, I'd be the first Superior Court judge elected to the position of LA District Attorney, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, I'd be the first Latina to lead the largest district attorney's office for Los Angeles. My grandparents were born in this country. My grandmother and grandfather were born in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother had a third grade education, and my grandfather had a sixth grade education. My grandmother was a maid and a cleaning lady and a domestic servant.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather was a laborer, a tailor, a fruit picker, a truant officer at the local English-speaking elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And they put 4 children through college, including my dad, who's the youngest, who is a Korean War veteran with the Purple Heart. He's still alive at 95.
Oh, wow. God bless them.
So in 2 generations, my grandmother used to be on her hands and knees scrubbing floors and toilets. And with hard work, opportunity, education, and determination, I've been able to be elected to the Superior Court and potentially the first Latina DA for the County of Los Angeles. So I take this responsibility and this obligation, particularly to our community, very humbly and very seriously.
And that's very commendable words, and I give kudos to you because right now I feel with the current climate when it comes to mass incarceration and the Hispanophobia that's lurking around, I feel that many Hispanic people have been victims of false accusations, and many of them, because since they don't speak English or they don't know the law, many of them have been forced to take plea deals, which are no contest, which serve no benefit to the person that's being convicted. And I feel that many Hispanic people have been unjustly incarcerated or racially profiled. If you were to become district attorney of Los Angeles, what would you do to reverse the mass incarceration of Hispanic men, and how can Hispanic people get more due process?
Well, let me talk about a couple things on this issue.
Be my guest.
When I was sitting in the Edelman Children's Court in the foster care dependency court system, I will tell you that 85 to 90% of the families and the children in the communities I serve were communities of color, both African American and the Hispanic Latino immigrant population communities. So I agree with you that there's a disproportionate impact, particularly on the children and the families of these communities of color. the thing that we have to be guard against with this concept and notion, if you will, of mass incarceration is the equally important concept of mass victimization. Because when we look at the statistics in our community, the Latino community, Latinos typically, if they're going to engage in criminal conduct, be it a domestic violence situation or maybe not a domestic violence situation, we sadly prey upon each other within our own community. It's, intraracial violence and crime patterns. So if we're going to look at mass incarceration, we also have to take an equally hard look at mass victimization. And when I think about the scales of justice and Lady Justice holding those scales, those are two of the things that need to be balanced with mass incarceration versus mass victimization. We know, particularly in the Latino community, that victims of domestic violence, sexual abuse, sexual assault, child abuse, child sexual assault do not want to report these crimes. And so this is something that I am very familiar with because I've been in the system for 35 years and I've seen it with my own two eyes up close and personal. But with regard to what the district attorney's office is going to do is, look, the arrests that are made by law enforcement get brought to the district attorney's office. In my entire career of 35 years, I would be reluctant to say I ever saw an arrest or a prosecution that was based on the color or the ethnicity, the color of someone's skin or their ethnic identity. I will say that I did see a couple of investigations where I felt that maybe there was racial bias involved in those investigations, and I did something about it as a prosecutor at that time. But I don't believe that, from my personal experience in the criminal justice system, both as a prosecutor and as a judge, I saw specific law enforcement agencies, in my experience, go out and say, I'm going to arrest that person because the color of their skin. I did not see that. That's not to say on occasion that that does not happen. I'm sure it probably does. But in my experience, the people that were charged and arrested and brought to court were there because it was believed that they had committed a crime. And I handled tens of thousands of cases in my experience. So that's just my global view on that issue.
The reason why I asked, Judge, is because from my observation in many cases where I've had to represent a few Hispanic people by writing letters and sending emails, I've seen prejudice, but not necessarily openly like we would think by, mentioning people's background. But there are ways that people can express their disgust towards another ethnicity just by their actions. And I
Yes,
feel that that's an issue that also needs to be taken into account because that's an issue that's happening a lot.
I agree with you. And we've seen an uptick in hate crimes in the last couple of years. First of all, or actually about 3 years ago or so, when COVID pandemic first hit, there was a big spike in anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes. The current DA does not file the hate crime enhancements on those cases where it seems to me that that should have been done. Now we have rising anti-Semitism. However, I would not tolerate any anti-Palestinian hate in any either. I will not tolerate hate. And I am very steadfast in this. In 2011, 2012, my daughter and I actually took on a teacher in our local school district for making anti-Semitic comments. My husband's Jewish. The comments were not directed to our daughter. However, a teacher was making anti-Semitic comments. It's listed on my website if there's a tab on for hate crimes at judgedaforda.com. There's articles. I was the only parent and my daughter was the only student that would come forward and basically sign a petition, took on the board, school board, and the teacher. And ultimately, the teacher got fired. So I don't tolerate hate. I don't tolerate this sort of tacit racial bias. I will not allow it. And as the Latina leading the office, that should send a signal to everybody. Also, we in the Latino community are so busy, especially in the working class communities, putting food on the table, a roof over their head, shoes on the kids' feet, and gas in the tank, and eggs on the table with what's going on, what it costs to earn and make a living.
Hmm.
We don't mobilize and vocalize the way we should. We tend to be so busy trying to work and earn a living and take care of our families that there's not a lot of extra time to get out there and be politically engaged and mobilize and be active in the way that maybe we should be when you look at some of the other very vocal communities, particularly in the minority communities.
Hmm.
And we need a call to action, and it's time for change. And I hope to be the leader of that call to action and for that change.
Absolutely. I feel that more than anything, Hispanics need to be involved because Hispanic people represent a large minority, but yet we are an invisible minority when it comes to social rights and to civil rights in many aspects, and the fact that many Hispanics tend to be apolitical. They don't
That's
realize that
interesting that you
regardless if
mentioned.
they've, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's interesting you mentioned that because my uncle was one of the founders of La Raza
Oh, really?
back in the 60s. Uh-huh. Julian Zamora is my uncle. He's deceased now.
Oh,
He was the
go
first Mexican
figure.
American in the United States to get a PhD. He taught at the University of Notre Dame. So I'm a lifelong Fighting Irish fan. I shouldn't admit that.
Okay,
But
no,
he
that's fine.
was one of the founders of La Raza back in the 60s. I have many of the books that he wrote. And so the seeds for social activism for the Latino community were actually planted by my uncle and along with several others. And but we just seem to have moved away from that in the intervening decades. I didn't mean to interrupt, but when you mentioned that, I was so excited to mention my Uncle Julian and give him a shout out. May he rest in peace.
No, no, it's fine. No, no offense taken. And, really, and kudos to your uncle that, contributed for the rights of the Chicano people because again, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of Hispanic and Chicano movements were very active, but like you said, many of them have died down. And I feel that because of issues of not being categorized as a race, many Hispanics tend to hide their identity. They try to either identify as white or black, depending on how their appearance is. And many of them don't believe that voting or even getting involved in community action does anything. And like, I've had many conversations with people within my organization and my directors that it's very important to be involved in community working and community action. And community action doesn't mean necessarily donating money. It means donating your time, volunteering, teaching, tutoring. That's very important because unfortunately, I have seen that the disparities, for example, I go a lot to the San Gabriel area and I seen Monterey Park, which is right next door to East LA, and I see
That's
the
where my
huge.
court is.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I've seen a huge contrast between East LA and Monterey Park, and I feel that Hispanics really need to get involved, especially when it comes to law, because there's not too many Hispanic lawyers or Hispanic judges, in terms of population, like with other ethnicities. So I think it's very important that we need to encourage Hispanics to get into law and to serve the community because I feel that we are a marginalized community when it comes to legal firms and legal services.
Well, let me speak to that issue. I just recently participated at an event at UCLA Law School. My daughter's a student there. She's actually on the Chicano Law Review and the UCLA Law Review.
Mhm.
I was participating in an event called the Latina Futures Symposium. I'm also a member of the Latina Lawyers Association. And I spoke last week at a candidates forum at East LA College over there on Vermont. And they are starting a law society. And I volunteered and told them they're just getting started. And I said, look, reach out to me through my campaign email address. I want to help get involved and help mentor young people, Latinos, to get into the legal profession. I do this quite often. I go to high schools, I'll go to colleges when I'm asked, and I will speak to the young people because we are the emerging majority of the population and we are underrepresented. You know it, and I know it. And I've been working quite steadily to help encourage minorities, Latinos, uh, and in the African American community as well. When I was over in the children's court, I wanted these kids to be able to get their GED and then consider options. When I go to speak at the community college, I went to community college. I didn't, I didn't go to Harvard or Yale or Stanford. I went to Fullerton College, and I can speak to the opportunities that I had and the advantage that I took of some luck and mentoring along the way. And I can help mentor and guide young people. And that's something I've been doing my entire adult life because of my unique experience and my good fortune. I've been wanting to use that to help others. I mean, to be honest, Mr. Sanchez, I could sit over in court and collect my salary and be the judge and wear my black robe and make orders and have people call me Your Honor.
Mm.
But for this particular situation, because I'm an elected Superior Court judge, I took an unpaid leave of absence. I stepped down from the bench to step up for the people so that I could foster more positive and necessary change in LA County, not only on a political level, but at a legal level and a social level. That's why I'm doing this. I'm the only candidate in the race that's not drawing a salary while I do this. But I'm doing this because I'm committed and dedicated to what needs to be done, the change that needs to come. We do not feel safer now than we did 3 years ago. I spend a lot of time in Boyle Heights, Lincoln Heights, East LA, and I see what's happened to our beautiful city, the downtown area, and it pains me to see what's happened. People don't feel safe. They don't want to take their kids to the park. They're afraid. There's people roaming the streets. There's crime. Businesses are suffering. The small businesses, many of the small businesses are owned by members of the Latino community, and it's hard for them to keep the doors open because of the revolving door of crime. And they're disproportionately impacted and affected in these working class communities. Norwalk, Montebello, Pico Rivera, parts of Whittier, Lakewood, on the east side. It's dramatic what's happened, and we should not accept this as, the new normal. It's unacceptable.
So I wanted to ask you, Judge, what is the reason for the recent surge in crime, and why is it that Mr. George Gascon is not prosecuting these cases? Like, what's the motive behind it?
He's not prosecuting cases because of his ideological position that men of color are being disproportionately criminalized. I don't agree with that perspective. I believe that communities of color are being disproportionately victimized by the ongoing and continuous crime. Although the murder category, the number of murders is down, and that's a good thing. Theft crimes are way up, property crimes are way up, and a lot of people are not even bothered to report crimes anymore. People do not feel safe in their homes, in their places of employment, and therefore there is an uptick in crime throughout the Los Angeles County, and much of the crime that's occurring is underreported. Also, he doesn't impose bail. He doesn't believe in bail. He thinks that this is racist and takes advantage of the poor. However, I don't see it in the same way as he does. I believe that if you continue to commit repeated criminal behavior, you need to be stopped. And if that means bail, then that's what that means, bail. If people are stealing because they need the necessities, they need bread, diapers, milk, baby formula, hot dogs, macaroni and cheese, or whatever it is they need to feed their family. Let's give this family a bag of groceries and wish them good luck. But if you're stealing high-end designer purses and you're sending in the juveniles to commit these serious and violent felonies, which is what they are, they're robberies, and you're putting the children at risk, you're putting the store owners at risk, and the consumers and the public at large, then those people need to be stopped in their tracks. That's not stealing for necessity. That is stealing for criminal enterprise.
Right, right. And I had a recent meeting with one of the other candidates that told me the same thing, that the ones that are behind the smash and grabs are actually organized crime rings, where, like you said, they
Correct.
send a lot of the young people. And one thing that I noticed that kind of sparked my attention, because he's also another conservative that's also running for the district attorney's office, is that he would like to see like a deferment program for the ones that do these crimes, especially if they're like a first time offender or just got involved with the wrong crowd. But as far as the ones that are the leaders, the ones that are organizing these things, they should be get the harshest penalties, the maximum of the law.
Well, I think we have to look at these cases on a case by case basis. You know, are these kids being used, or are they actively participating because they're getting something out of it? So, there's some very sophisticated young kids that are involved in this activity, and sadly, they do it by choice, not because they're forced into it.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, I don't believe in blanket policies. We have to mete out justice on an individualized and case by case basis. So yes, I do agree that this is organized crime that are running these retail thefts rings, but I'd have to look at it individually. Children obviously need to be looked at with a different sort of an eye. But I can tell you that there are many young, well, they're children legally, they're minors under the law, but they are engaging in adult criminal activity. And
Mm-hmm.
that's I would take that seriously.
Well, yeah, because there is up to a point that a minor knows the difference between rights and wrong. There are many cases where they're coerced or they're forced into it, but if they show mental capability, that they know what they were doing and they know the consequences, I believe that in those individual cases they should be tried as adults, because again, many minors in general, I'm just saying from my observation, because since minors are protected, in many cases, minors do take advantage of that to avoid getting prosecuted. So I do
Correct.
believe that
And
in
the
many
adults
cases.
use the minors almost like the mules to do
Hmm.
the crimes because they know under this administration nothing's going to happen.
Hmm.
But what's going to happen when these kids go in and steal from a shopkeeper and they're shot and killed because they're committing this robbery? This is what's going to happen. I'm frankly surprised it hasn't happened yet.
I guess because it's too many people. It's like even if a shopkeeper shoots someone, there might be 20 that could jump on top of them. So it's like they
Well,
they kind of they kind of
and,
think, do I do it, or do I take a risk,
right.
shooting someone, and then I get 100 that get on top of me, because like they attack in groups. They don't attack one by one.
Well, and that shopkeeper down in Compton that owned the bakery that was part of that whole situation, there was a 13-year-old that went in there and with a mob of people behind the 13-year-old. We cannot be using our children as pawns for purposes of furthering criminal enterprise. I do agree, however, on the older juveniles, if they're committing rape, robbery, murder, serious robberies, they are going to be potentially looking at doing adult crime because they're committing adult crime, but it has to be a case by case, particularized um, assessment and not just blanket policies.
Yeah, because not every policy fits all, and that's what I think is very important. That I believe there should be some type of an oversight board within the district attorney's office, like to look at individual cases, and especially that those that don't meet the merit to bring to trial. I think that will help to relieve the overload of cases that are swamping the DA's office. At the same time, it will be able to execute justice promptly, because there are many people that also use the district attorney's office to go after people they don't like. So that's also another concern that I've seen, that there are many cases that do merit being taken to be filed, but there are many cases that shouldn't be filed, because it's like there really is no merit. Like if there's no evidence to prove something, just because someone doesn't like someone for whatever reason, I don't think it should be brought to court. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, I agree. We cannot weaponize the courts and the judicial system in the process because the consequences are too high for the aggrieved party. I absolutely agree. We cannot weaponize this institution. The stakes are too high. I agree with you.
and the whole purpose of being a public servant, it's not for political purpose, but it's for the essence of public safety. And I feel that it's gotten too politicized. Like when I was at the district attorney's panel last Thursday, I saw a lot of politicization, and I thought it was very uncalled for, especially when it comes to civil discourse.
I don't know which, was that the one up in the valley?
No, that was the one that was in Beverly Hills, the one that you attended, where the black
Oh,
lady was
yes.
shouting
Okay.
epithets at Mr. Hatami.
Well, yes. Well, um,
To me that wasn't civil. So it's like, there needs to be like mutual respect, especially when it comes to civil discourse, because when you don't have that respect anymore, it's like it doesn't serve the public any good, and it's a waste of taxpayers' money.
well, leadership starts at the top, and we've lost our way, not only locally, but statewide and nationally. And we need to bring that civil discourse back to a level where we can actually hear each other and not just talk over each other. And
Oh,
that's what
absolutely.
I'm hoping to be able to accomplish when I am elected. We need to be able to sit at a table and enjoy a meal and have some civil, meaningful, productive conversation about the work that needs to be done and how we're going to roll up our sleeves collectively and get together and get it done, and not just throw insults at each other and curse words and point fingers. We're way beyond that at this point in time. We have the World Cup coming in 2026 and the Olympics coming in 2028. LA's become an international embarrassment, and the work should have started a year ago, but I'm doing my best to get it started now.
Well, I really wish you best in your endeavors, that you're able to win the race, and all the other candidates as well. May the best person win. And one final question before we conclude, because we're almost out of time. Um, what would you say would be your biggest challenge if you were to become district attorney of LA? What would be your biggest challenge you will be facing once you reach into that office?
We need to restore credibility and public confidence in the district attorney's office. That's going to be a big challenge. People have lost respect, and that will be a big challenge. I think I'm perfectly situated to restore that confidence in the leadership of the office because I just left there a few years ago. And being a Superior Court judge, I have a different perspective. I took off the prosecutorial blinders, and when you put on the black robe of justice, you have to make sure, for example, a criminal's constitutional rights are scrupulously maintained and upheld. You have to maintain the decorum and the credibility of the proceedings. And I'm uniquely situated and qualified to do that. And that is going to be a challenge because the number one goal for the district attorney's office is public safety. And we have to restore confidence and trust that the next district attorney will do just that. Restore confidence and credibility that public safety is the number one goal and priority for me as your next district attorney.
And that's the whole purpose of being a public servant. A public servant is there to serve the interest of the public, not to be for their own self-interest.
Well, that's what I've been doing for 35 years. I've never worked in private practice as an attorney. I started in law school. To think that I could start essentially on the ground floor in the basement as a law clerk, where I used to make coffee and copies for the lawyers, and to go back and be the leader of the largest prosecutorial agency in the country is humbling and gratifying and exhilarating and daunting. But I'm up to the task, and I have to tell you, I'm ready to assume that role of leadership. I have friends in the office that are very excited about the fact that I could come back and be the leader of the office and restore that confidence and credibility. It's not anything I'm doing for my own personal gain, which is why I stepped down from the bench once again on that unpaid leave of absence to step up for the people of LA County. And I would like to direct your listeners to my website. It's judgeda4da.com. I'd really appreciate them taking a look to see what I offer as your candidate and the next district attorney for Los Angeles.
Sure, and for listeners on your end, whoever wants to get a hold of Spanish United and what we do, We are on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United Facebook, Twitter, now known as X, Instagram, YouTube. Anyone that wants to make a donation to Spanish United, you could reach out to me. Anything that you give is used to help the homeless population, the vulnerable population, and many Hispanic people that are in need. And we conclude the podcast. I want to say, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show. You have been a very wonderful guest. And as soon as I finish, I will email you and text you the link that you could share with all of your constituents and all of your friends.
Well, we will put it out on social media, and I look forward to partnering with Spanish United moving forward. So thank you, and thank you again.
Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.